let's talk about the composition of functions, and by that I mean let's just do a whole bunch of examples. So for the first one, let's go with f of x is equal to 4x squared plus 1, and g of x is 2x minus 3. So if I'm going to take the composition, f composed with g of x, then this means f of g of x. So I'm going to start on the inside. I'm going to replace g of x with what it is by definition. G of x by definition is 2x minus 3. So this next part, I'm going to take 2x minus 3, and I'm going to plug it into f. F is a function that whatever you give it, it squares it, and then it adds, squares it, and then it multiplies by 4, and then adds 1. So this is going to look like 4 times what I gave it, and I gave it 2x minus 3. That whole thing is going to be squared, and then I'm going to add 1. So that's what it is. If you want to simplify, I suppose you could argue that this would be simplified, but if you really start expanding, you'd get a 4x squared, and you'd have, let's see, minus 6x, another minus 6x, that'd be a minus 12x, and then plus 9 plus 1. So this would be, let's see, 16x squared minus 48x plus 36 plus 1, which is a 16x squared minus 48x plus 37. Okay, if you went in the opposite order, in other words, g composed with f of x, I would get g of f of x. Again, always start on the inside. On this inside this time is f, which is 4x squared plus 1. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this whole quantity, 4x squared plus 1, and plug it into g. G is the function that whatever you give it, it multiplies by 2, and then it subtracts 3. So this will look like 2 times what I gave it, which is 4x squared plus 1, and then I'm going to subtract 3. To simplify, that looks like an 8x squared plus 2, and a minus 3, which is an 8x squared minus 1. And the biggest thing you'll notice at this point, sorry to keep moving around here, biggest thing you'll notice at this point is that f composed with g of x does not look the same as g composed with f of x. In other words, composition is not commutative, which is the math way to say it matters what order you do it in. It matters if it says f composed with g of x or g composed with f of x. Next example, see if I can do a better job with my microphone this time. So let's go with f of x is x squared minus x, and g of x is equal to 3x plus 2. So f composed with g of x, let's go with that one, is going to be f of g of x. Always start on the inside. The inside is 3x plus 2. Plug that into the f function. The f function is whatever you give it, it squares it, and then it subtracts it. Expanding that to simplify, I get a 9x squared. I'll get a plus 6x and another plus 6x. That'll be 12x. Plus 4, send the minus through, minus 3x minus 2, which what does that simplify to? 9x squared. And then I have plus 12x minus 3x. That's a plus 9x. And a plus 4 minus 2. That's a plus 2. So if you wanted to evaluate f composed with g of x, let's say at, how about 0? 2 ways you could do it. I just found f composed with g of x, which is right here. So I could just plug in 0 into that function. So I get 9 times 0 squared plus 9 times 0 plus 2, which gives me just 2. Or you could do f composed with g of 0 is equal to f of g of 0. All right, start on the inside. G of 0. G is a function up here. It's 3 times x plus 2. I gave it 0, so 3 times 0 is 0 plus 2 is 2. So g of 0 is 2, which means I'm now looking at f of 2. F of 2, let's see, plug in 2 for x. We get 2 squared is 4 minus 2. Well, I'm back to 2. That was a coincidence, though. So either way I get to 2, so you can do it in either direction, whichever makes you happier. You can also go the other way with composition in the sense that, let's say you're given h of x is equal to 4 times x plus 2 squared minus 7, and you would like to write h of x as a composition of 2 functions. This becomes very, very useful in calculus and other classes, which is why we talk about it in algebra. Well, you could do this a couple different ways, but essentially the idea is I have G is an inside, F is the outside. So to me, it kind of looks like maybe the inside is x plus 2. If that's what I'm going to pick, well, then F better take care of everything else that I have to do. So I'm essentially going to square it. I'm going to multiply by 4, and I'm going to subtract 7. And if you want to check yourself, you'll see that you'll start on the inside here with the G I've chosen, that's x plus 2, and then plug that into F. F is a function that whatever you give it, it squares it. I gave it x plus 2, multiplies by 4, and then subtract 7, which I can see that's exactly what I had for H. So that works. You could absolutely do other combinations of functions. There's not one right answer if you're decomposing, but in this case, you could do g of x is x plus 2 quantity squared, which would mean f of x is all you have to do left, which is multiply by 4 and then subtract 7. That would work too. So there's more than one way to do these.